Hi everyone, thanks for coming back for part 2. I just realized something just after I finished the first part, my last video, that this root word right here is also the word spirit. Also, it means to breathe, and it's the root word of the word that we get the word pneumonia from. It means lungs, but it also means to breathe, and I just want to show you, it also means the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, and I'll just show you that. Okay, and it's really interesting, all the number 11s that come up in relation to the Holy Spirit, but this one is in the New Testament. So I'll pull this one up first, and you see here it's talking about the Holy Spirit. And when you look at the word for spirit, you see that it's that word right there. It's the word pneuma in the Greek. It's the root word that you get the word pneumonia from. I'll show you this root word right here. It means to breathe or to blow. And it's the word for the Spirit or the Holy Spirit in the Greek in this form. You see the word pneuma over here, and it's the third person of the triune God, the Holy Spirit. And what's interesting is that this was coming up in the Song of Solomon's 2:17. Okay, it was right here where it said, "Until the day break and the shadows flee away, turn, my beloved, and be thou like a roe or a young hart upon the mountains of Bether." And this word daybreak means to breathe or to blow in the Hebrew as well as in the Greek. And like I said, this is coming up in verse 17. It's chapter 2, verse 17, and this word in the Greek is also the word spirit. It's the word that's used for the Holy Spirit, and it was in Acts 2:17 that the Holy Spirit was poured out. And so I'll just show you that. Okay, it was in the book of Acts. Over here it says, "And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place." And then when you get to verse 17 is where it's prophesying about the last days when God's Spirit will be poured out upon all flesh. It says here, "And it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams." So this is coming up in verse 17 where the Holy Spirit is poured out. And it's in verse 17 where it's talking about the daybreak, which is really when life begins, apparently, because this is where it's talking about breathing. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to point out is that the Song of Solomon's is actually the 22nd book of the Bible, and this is something that Pastor Sandy Armstrong had mentioned in one of his latest videos. Okay, it was this video over here, the Exodus and the Marriage of the Church, 2017 Exodus and the Marriage of the Church, and I'll put the link for that in the description box. But he mentioned how the Song of Solomon's is the 22nd book of the Bible, and there's actually 117 verses in the Song of Solomon's. And I've mentioned before how there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and how this corresponds with the 22 almond cups in the menorah, which I believe is a representation of the DNA. Someone had pointed out in one of the comments that the Hebrew letters look like chromosomes, and I noticed that they do in fact look like chromosomes. Here's some images of chromosomes, and like I said, someone had pointed out, I believe it was Little Bird, who pointed out that they seem to look like chromosomes, the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And I immediately saw the resemblance when I had pulled this up. I was actually researching something else, but I immediately noticed the resemblance when I saw this picture, and I realized that there was 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and they match up with the 22 almond cups in the menorah, which represents the church, and the fact that there's 22 autosomes that are identical. These are the chromosomes that are identical, and then the 23rd one is the sex chromosome. So this one is set apart from the other 22. And so it's really interesting that it's in the 22nd book of the Bible, in the Song of Solomon's, where it's describing the wedding supper of the Lamb, the marriage between Christ and the church. And so the other thing that's interesting is that there's 117 verses in the Song of Solomon's, and Psalm 117 is the middle chapter of the Bible, and there's actually 1,189 chapters altogether, but Psalm 117 is the chapter that divides the entire Bible. And another thing that's interesting is that there's 8 chapters in the Bible, because I believe the number 8 is significant as well. I've talked about that also. And it's interesting that there's 2 books in the Bible that actually represent the bride. One of those would be the book of Ruth, which is the 8th book of the Bible. And then the other book of the Bible that represents the bride is the book of Esther, and that just happens to be the 17th book. And so here in the Song of Solomon's, you have 8 chapters and 117 verses, and this is all about the marriage of Christ and the church. And it just so happens to be the 22nd book of the Bible, and altogether there's actually 44 chromosomes. You can see that over here. It says humans have a total of 46 chromosomes in each body cell. I'm sorry, I meant to say there's actually a total of 44 autosomes. So there's 46 chromosomes, and 44 of these are autosomes. You get one set of 22 autosomes from your mom and another set of 22 from your dad. So altogether in each cell you have 44 autosomes. And so the 44th book of the Bible is the book of Acts. And so this is the end of the church age, because another thing that Pastor Sandy had pointed out is that he said he was told by God to add up the numbers of the chapters from Matthew to Acts, and it equals 117. Okay, so I just added them all up. You can see them over here. There's 28 in Matthew, 16 in Mark, 24 in Luke, 21 in John, and 28 chapters in the book of Acts. So I added all those numbers up over here, and as you can see, it comes out to 117. Okay, so it's interesting that you had 17 books over here, and then you had another 5 books that make up the 22, the first set of the alphabet. This would be the letter Tav. This is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which looks like a cross, incidentally. And this is where it's talking about the marriage between Christ and the church. And then you have the next 17 would actually be over here. The 39th book would be the next set of 17, and then you have 5 more again, which would be the next set of the alphabet, ending with book 44, which is the book of Acts. So you have another set of the alphabet, or another 22 over here, ending with the book of Acts, and then another 22 books ending with the book of Revelation, making a total of 66. That's 22 plus 22 plus 22. And there just so happens to be 22 chapters in the book of Revelation. So like I said, I believe this all has to do with DNA, and I can talk a little bit more about the number 22, but what I want to do next is I want to show you a couple of tables, and I'll just go ahead and show you this one first. This is one I had done some time ago, but in this one I just added the word fig because I wanted to see if it would come up in relation to the tree of life, and it did come up in this table. You can see it right here. You see the word fig. It's actually coming where it says Jehovah God, which is interesting. I didn't notice that until just now. And over here it says, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat, for in the day that you eat thereof thou shalt surely die. And Jehovah God said, it is not good that man should be alone. So it's interesting that it's coming right where it's talking about the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but it's also sharing the G in Jehovah God. So I'm not sure what that means exactly, but what I wanted to point out is that I had done this some time ago, and I had put in tree of life, Eden, and DNA strand, and right here where you have the word strand, it was coming up over here in verse 24 where it says, therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And of course it was in verse 22 that the rib was taken from Adam. And so what's interesting is if you multiply 2 times 22, you get 44. And like I said earlier, there's a total of 44 autosomes in a human cell, 22 from the mother and 22 from the father. Okay, and then it's in verse 23 where the man said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of a man. And there's 23 cells or chromosomes in a gamete cell. So when 2 gamete cells come together, that makes 46, a total of 46. And then it's in the next verse where it talks about the 2 cleaving together. It says, therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. So like I said earlier, I believe this all has to do with DNA ultimately. And so I have some more tables that I wanted to share. I thought it was interesting how the word fig tree comes up in some of these tables. I wanted to try to confirm that the fig tree is connected to the bridegroom. So I put in fig tree, bridegroom, and Jesus, and this is actually the 6th match out of 6, but I want to go over all of them, but this is just the last one that I looked at. And it's really interesting how this comes up. You see the word tree here in the pink. It's coming through the word Jesus, Jesus Christ over here. And then you have groom coming at an angle over here. And then right through the word groom, you have the word fig. And it also says over here, love, I rejoice greatly. So you have the word love coming over here. And then you have the word bride over here in the lavender, and this is coming up in the book of John, ending with John 1:7. So that's interesting how again it ends with the number 17. But I have a lot more to share, but I'll have to continue in the next video. Thank you.